Grant Thornton webinar on the Interim Budget 2024. As expected, this was an interim budget and therefore no major announcements have come on the tax front. Going on, Jaijit, I'll first come to you. The recent report on the Indian economy stated that India is expected to become the third largest economy in the world with a GDP of $5 trillion in the next 3 years and a developed economy or a developed country by 2027. How realistic is this? Do you believe that it is doable?
So let's look at how India will become the third largest economy. Which are the fourth and third largest economy as of now? So India is the fifth largest economy. So Germany is the third largest, is the fourth largest. Japan is the third largest, and they've got 4 point something trillion as their GDP. Unfortunately, both of them have either zero or negative GDP growth. So they're not going to grow in the next 1 to 2 years in the foreseeable years. Whereas if you look at India, with roughly about $4 trillion, because by March we'll cross $4 trillion, we'll be powering at least 6 to 7% per year, if not higher than that. If we just do a simple maths, we will cross $5 trillion in the next 3 years, and that takes us beyond Germany and Japan. So that's under normal circumstances, where it's ceteris paribus, everything else being equal, there's no other earth-shaking action that happens. But the situation that India is in, which is a healthy economic growth we're having, a lot of bullishness we're having, a lot of investments lined up, it's a hard-earned situation. We are actually in a very troubled water that we're operating in. We've got a good ship, but operating in a troubled water. What are these troubles that can really upset the apple cart? So if you look at globally, we are exporting roughly about $800 billion. By the end of March this year, we would have exported $800 billion. About half of them is merchandise, half of them is services. The moment we're talking about services, it's all getting challenged by something called AI that everybody is now aware of. At a very rapid rate, AI is getting into much of the services. We have seen big techs firing big numbers because these numbers are getting, or these jobs are getting replaced by AI, and therefore there is no reason why much of the services imports that India is doing is not going to get challenged by AI. Do we have alternatives? Are we exporting AI as a service for that matter? Are we exporting computing as a service for that matter? We are still not there. The power consumptions required for such an effort are humongous. It'll take us at least half a decade to reach that level. So clearly in the next 3 years, it can have an impact on what we're exporting, so that half of the exports does get challenged. Even in terms of merchandise, there is significant amount of disruption happening globally. We are seeing the disjointing of the East and the West, especially China and the rest of the world. We are seeing supply chains getting disrupted and threatened. Threatened because of wars, threatened because of piracy, and threatened because of local geopolitical issues. And therefore, these commodities can get constrained. So if the commodities don't reach India, which is the inputs, how are we going to export? And even if they reach, the cost will go up because the insurance cost goes up because of the threats during the logistics movement. Just because there is supply chain constraint, the cost will go up. It's a demand-supply issue. If the cost of the inputs goes up, then clearly the manufactured products will also cost more. That then disrupts much of the business models around which these commodities and goods are built on, and so they will probably not sell. So there will be a diminished market that will be there. In addition, what's happening is because of this disruption, markets are closing down. They're becoming more and more protectionist. Europe is closing down in the form of saying, oh, we'll have some green taxation. Whatever is being imported, they must have a large amount of their production driven by green energy. These are all protectionist measures, garbed in whichever way. Similarly, US has put over 500% taxation on Chinese goods. It's also trying to make sure that there is a lot of goods being manufactured within US. So we are facing a lot of anti-dumping duties on Indian products. So India is facing these challenges in terms of market access. On the other hand, we have not changed our policy. So we are a free open dumping ground for all those entities and companies and countries which are not able to sell their products anywhere else, because others have quickly built their protectionist grounds. Forget about protectionism, we are not even leveraging our safeguards fast enough. Then a safeguard brought in a year later is not of much help. Anti-dumping duty being brought in after 3 years of investigation, by the time those industries would die out. So those are a bunch of challenges coming from externalities, which is markets closing down, market access not being given, technological challenges, but also internally, if you look at the local geopolitics that we are facing, as it is last year, we had a hiked budget of about 13% of our budget amount going to defense. This year, there's an indication that that will be further hiked by 20%. So about, last year was about 5.4 trillion rupees that was given to budget. This year it's about 7.5 trillion which will be given to budget, to defense. And that's per force. It's not that we want to spend money on defense. If we don't do that, that's a national threat. If money goes into defense, and last year as an example, 1/4 of that money was allocated to education. So 4 times education was going into defense, and we have to do it. It's not a choice that we have. Therefore, other sectors do get squeezed out. And if other sectors get squeezed out, then where and how does the economy grow? Because the government has been the primary driver of economy in this country, right? A lot of the spend and growth has been because the government has been putting money into infrastructure. If that gets curtailed, then there'll be an impact on the economy. And lastly, among the key points, there are many other points. Lastly, there is as we all know, there is significant climate change happening. We are putting in money for climate change technologies, which will reduce the rate of climate change. But I think as we have all awakened up, we can see that climate change has already happened. So we need to put in money into the post-climate change era. To give you an example, we are right now having enough food grains for 2 years, right? When the climate change happens, and entire civilizations have been wiped out very, very quickly because of climate change. Harappan civilization got wiped out. The Romans became weak because of climate change. The productive lands will stop producing food, and the unproductive land will perhaps become green. And during the transition period, we may face famines for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. So we need to put in investments into silos for food, which will be stored for a much longer time. And without that, there's a challenge. So there will be floods coming in, there will be other kinds of impacts coming in. And all of those can easily shake the nice stable ship that we have right now. But again, as I said, ceteris paribus, if none of these happen, we will for sure be the 3rd largest economy by 2027 and cross the $5 trillion mark.
Fantastic. Some great inputs, Jaijit. You spoke about the risk of imports and the supply chain disruption, maybe increased import bills, especially in oil that we may have a problem with. But one more thing that you referred to was AI. Right. And the impact it will have on jobs. Now, India particularly with its large population, young population, may be impacted the most as far as AI is concerned. How do you see this? But while AI may generate new jobs, maybe not at the same rate. So exactly how do you see the impact of AI?
Right, I think very well put, because people normally argue that when a new technology comes in, it may disrupt some jobs, but it creates far more jobs subsequently. There was a strike in US when the rotary dial came in, which replaced all those people who were picking up the plugs and plugging them in. So you would call up the local center and say, please connect me to Riaz. They'll take out the plug and plug it into Riaz's line, and that's how you would get connected. When the rotary dial got invented, there was a huge protest and strike in US. Now, if that did not go through, double the population of US would just have been doing the plugging in and plugging out. So clearly more jobs got created because of change in technology. Even if you look at Delhi for that matter, the Tongawalas went on strike when taxis were introduced into Delhi. They said our jobs is threatened. But clearly there are far more taxi drivers out there than there were Tongawalas. So clearly more jobs get created. The only challenge with AI, and as I have been calling it for the last 10 years, it's extreme automation, which is automation happening very quickly, very fast, and at all levels. Right, so it's not the low-level jobs that are getting impacted; it's the highly skilled jobs also that are getting impacted. Which is why we see that high-paid jobs in the big techs are getting laid off. They are, being shed. Now, is it possible that the economy and the government and the policymakers will be able to react so quickly to such a large amount of job loss happening. It looks very improbable and difficult, and therefore that clearly is a big challenge. In addition to it, who is going to create this AI? There is again significant focus by the government to create AI within the country, and by AI I mean generative AI, because that's the one that seems to be making much faster impact on jobs. But for that, besides having good manpower, we also need a significant amount of computation, significant amount of data, and significant amount of energy. To give you a view of what is it that we're talking about in terms of energy, a new AI data center for Google will consume about 1 gigawatt of energy. And how much is 1 gigawatt? Delhi consumes 7 gigawatts. We're talking about 1/7 of Delhi's energy being put into one single data center to create the kind of AI or fundamental AI that Google and Microsoft and others are creating. It's a challenge. Why is it a challenge? Because from a policy perspective, the question will be, shall I divert this much of power to AI, which will benefit some people, or shall I divert it to the MSMEs, who can then generate more jobs, do more manufacturing, contribute to the economy? And these are not easy questions to answer. Now let's also make a little comparison between a AI data center which consumes 1 gigawatt of energy and the human brain, because it's basically replicating the human brain. The human brain consumes about 50 watts of energy, which is the same as a light bulb, right? So a light bulb versus 1/7 the energy that Delhi consumes. The reason I mentioned that is that there is a tremendous amount of scope in AI to reduce the computational inefficiencies of the algorithms. So right now the algorithms are created in a manner that it consumes that kind of energy. A billion into billion matrix multiplication is what needs to be done to solve some of these problems. And therefore perhaps where India can contribute is creating the new kinds of algorithms for AI. But again, for that we need data. Now the government has stepped forward saying we'll provide all the government data for whoever wants to create this AI. But is that sufficient? Is that data in the kind of format that we need? Is it the same kind of data that let's say Microsoft or Google or Amazon has? Clearly not, because what Microsoft and others are having are conversational data, which means that if they replicate what I'm saying and it's generated by a bot, it'll have the same annotations, it'll have the same kind of pauses, same kind of speech rather than a robotic speech, right, which is text to speech conversion. The reason I'm going into these details is also because this threatens our voice-based BPOs, right? So chatbots have already threatened our some of the email-based transactions that we were doing. It's now also going to threaten our voice-based transactions, because the voice on the other side will no more be a robotic voice. It'll be able to understand what is being said. It'll be a conversational voice, and it'll be in any nature that you want to speak. If it's an American accent, if it's a European accent, you can make it speak in any accent you want with no disruption on the other side, because the other side is just a robot. And therefore,
there I would like to assure our audiences, we actually have Dr. Jaijit Bhattacharya sitting here. It's not a bot, it's not AI. Yes.
So in fact, my latest article talks about the fact that there is now given plausible deniability, because you are insisting I'm here, your video is saying so. When you put it up as a permissible proof in the court of law, I can always argue that was a deep fake. Yeah. So the entire CRPC, the entire Evidence Act goes out of the window. And the reason I'm again mentioning this and taking a segue from what you said is that it's going to have very fundamental disruptions in the economy. The legislations are going for a toss. All your electronic evidences will no more be taken in as permissible proof in the court of law. And therefore there is very fundamental plumbing that needs to be done. And how fast we do that, which will then lead to more jobs getting created, becomes a question mark. And so it is a very challenging situation that we'll face because of AI, which I term it as extreme automation.
Jaijit, coming to you again, you referred to it, but one challenge that one can foresee is the trade-off between economic development and energy transition, carbon footprint. How is that going to impact India's growth journey? Any thoughts on that?
So I think the energy transition story has been pretty much abandoned in Europe. The moment they got into this challenge of trying to source energy from Russia, that's not happening. all the coal-fired plants that were mothballed in Germany are back on track. Now the expectation is that developing economies such as India is supposed to throttle its growth for the sake of finding clean energy. That's not a valid expectation. We are a rich country. We are a rich country, and will pretty soon, as you had mentioned in the beginning, will become the third richest country in the world in a couple of years. But we are a rich country of poor people, right? So our per capita income is still not $3,000, right? And it's a long way before we reach a $10,000 mark. It is not justifiable that we throttle the aspirations of our poor who want to have a decent lifestyle for the sake of energy transition, which the rest of the world is not following, right? They are following, they will follow it when they want to, they will not follow it whenever they want to. So I don't think that the Indian government is also in a mood that we will choke growth because of energy transition. However, having said that, we have naturally reached a level where renewable energy is turning out to be cheaper than coal-fired energy, right? In the auctions that have happened for power, solar power has come to around 2 rupees, 20 per unit, and obviously on an average it will come to about 3 rupees, which is quite competitive. Over a period of time, when the solar panels get fully depreciated, it almost becomes free energy. So you get free energy, we are blessed with lots of sun, so we are actually at a competitive advantage when we compare ourselves with the cold countries. So it does make sense for us from a competitive advantage perspective to move into clean energy, and as a byproduct it also helps the planet. In fact, when people say save the planet, I kind of hesitate, because the planet will always be saved. Yeah. Planet is not waiting for us. It has been bombed by asteroids, by volcanoes. The planet has been there. So it's essentially about us as humans, right? It is definitely having a huge impact on us. And which also brings us to the other point that I did not see in this budget, is tackling pollution. It's one of the biggest issues that especially at NCR we are facing, but so are people in Mumbai, Kolkata, and so on and so forth. They're all facing the same issue. So as we are doing the transition to cleaner energy, the pollution is not coming from just unclean energy, it's also coming from our agricultural practices. And a lot of investments are needed to make sure that that transition happens, so that we are able to breathe properly and we as humans survive. The planet will survive, but the issue is about humans. And as we are not investing in reducing pollution, the healthcare cost is going up. The number of strokes have gone up, the number of heart attacks have gone up, the overall number of deaths have gone up because of the tremendous amount of pollution that we are living through. It's not a state issue, it is a cross-state issue. There are multiple states that are involved, which is where it's not just about transitioning in terms of energy usage, but the overall issue of pollution. Because pollution is coming from various aspects and not just the form of energy that we're using. And I don't think there will be a pause in the growth. I don't think that's a trade-off that we can afford to do, because we need to create about 8 million jobs on an annual basis. We need to grow at least 8%. The target that what the government is looking at is about 7%. I think we need to increase that pace. And with all the headwinds that are out there, with the global uncertainties, the wars, the geopolitics, the geoeconomics, it's a lot of challenges that we are facing, and therefore we can't make that trade-off. But under the natural circumstances, we are going towards a glide path where we will automatically move towards clean energy. But along with it, because the focus is not saving planet but saving humans, we also need to reduce pollution, and that's a significant investment that we need to make.
No, absolutely, because while there cannot be a trade-off, we cannot survive unless the human life survives, right? Just one other area I wanted to completely changing tracks. It is about the India, Middle East and Europe corridor that the finance minister referred to. How exactly does it impact India? Is it a game changer? What are your thoughts on this?
So let's look at the background in which this was created. Suez Canal has become a choke point. The cost of transition through Suez Canal has gone up, and the other way of doing it is going around the Cape of Good Horn in Africa, which means the Again, the cost of transit becomes much higher because you have to spend that much more time. The holding cost of goods becomes higher because in transit it takes much more time, so all that money is getting locked up. Therefore, we had to have another way of reaching Europe. That's been a 1,000-year challenge. Typically, the challenge has been from the other way side, which is the Europeans trying to reach India. Now, what we're trying to do is do it from both sides, although the idea came from India. And during the closing days of G20, this is something that got conceptualized, and very, very quickly that agreement came in through with all the stakeholders, and it was a natural step forward. It reduces the cost of transit of goods. It makes India more competitive. It also makes Europe more competitive. It's a win-win situation. It also makes all the countries in between much more prosperous because it'll go through UAE, they gain out of it, it'll go through Turkey, and so on and so forth, through Greece and so on. Obviously, there are 3 points of loading and unloading that will happen that will still increase the cost, but not to the extent that that it becomes uncompetitive compared to going through the Suez Canal choke points or going through the Cape of Good Horn of Africa. So it's a great innovation. It's a great geoeconomic innovation that has happened, and it's going to make all our commodities much more competitive in Europe. Having said that, we also had an initiative called the Chabahar port in Iran, and it's something that Iran is quite unhappy about because it doesn't seem to have the kind of traffic that it was supposed to have. Now, that is not completely India's fault because Iran got caught up in the sanctions, and therefore the trade with Iran becomes a question mark. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that there was also a railway line that was built by the British, which went all the way from Turkey through the Middle East into Iran, into Pakistan, and just 10 kilometers away from the Rajasthan border. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the cheapest ways to do transportation. Now, clearly, we can't catch it from the Rajasthan border of Pakistan, but we can catch it from the Chabahar port. And so we need not talk about trade in Iran per se, but we can use it as a transit, and you only have 2 points of loading and unloading if we go through that. I'm sure the experts in the government are looking at it, but it'll be interesting to also see another corridor open up and also use the investments that we've already put into Chabahar port.
I mean, just following up on that question, when we speak about this particular corpus for a 50-year loan, do you see challenges in implementing something like that and monitoring a 50-year loan? It is a large and humongous commitment. So how do you see it?
I think your question is at the heart of the problem itself, is that there is public money. And public money has to follow certain procedures, and rightly so, right? And when you put these procedures on top of money which is going to be invested into research, which by definition doesn't have a concrete outcome. In fact, it may have zero outcome, right? Because before we start doing something, we don't know whether that will work or not work. It becomes very challenging. Therefore, my guess is that there will be onerous requirements put on top by the time it peters down and comes down to the last level bureaucrat who has to implement it, because he has to do it the right way, following the GFR, following the extent processes, and so on and so forth. Now, once those processes are put into place, will it be worthwhile for the innovators to really go for the fund? Then becomes a question mark. Because if we don't put this process, let's look at the other way around. Let's say that it's easily given. Somebody knocks on the door and says, here is a piece of paper and here is an innovation I want to do. Will I be, can you give me the money? So that becomes a loan mailer, right? And therefore it leads to other kinds of issues. Now, if the government is going and giving this money for innovation, along with it, what is really important is also giving market access. Because you can innovate, and there have been a lot of innovations happening in the government labs, in CSIR, in DRDO, and so on. Are they seeing the commercial light of the day? They're not, because there is no market access to it. Now, what happens elsewhere is there's long-term contracts that are given, that if you are able to create this, then I'm going to buy this from you for the next 20 years. That is not happening in India. In fact, to the extent that we are actually facing the other problems where in a given tax regime, people are going to have deciding to invest, but because the tax regime has changed, they stop the investment completely. And I can take examples after examples. PVC suspension, very critical for the economy. large number of players had decided to invest. But now we've got dumping going on in this country. And all those large investment jobs are now becoming question mark. If you look at isopropyl alcohol, again, very key components, very key chemical input for many industries. Same situation, there's dumping happening in the country. So our manufacturers and our startups and entrepreneurs are not able to get access to our own market. Forget about market in Europe and market in China and so on and so forth. If you look at critical minerals, again, something very important for innovation, for cutting edge stuff that both Ramendra and he mentioned. If you look at ferro molybdenum, same issue. There is dumping going on. We are not able to protect the market. So the ability to provide market access, the Indian market to Indian companies and Indian startups becomes the other side of the coin of giving funding for research. The two have to go hand in hand.